Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining our session on the Lieberman-Bryan Inclusion Rating Scale for Physical Education. We know that you have a lot of things to do, and we appreciate your commitment to including all your students in physical education. My name is Lauren Lieberman, and I'm a Distinguished Service Professor at SUNY Brockport. It's my 27th year teaching there. And I'm also the founder and director of Capabilities at Brockport. I teach in the Adapted Physical Education undergraduate and graduate program, and I do a lot of research on inclusion.
Hello, everybody. My name is Michelle Grenier. I am at the University of New Hampshire in the Department of Kinesiology. I've been fortunate enough to work with Lauren Lieberman and Ali Bryan in developing this instrument and researching it, because really what I've been always concerned with and thinking about are teacher practices and how we can be more inclusive within our general physical education setting and or our adapted physical education setting, whatever setting you are working in. So we're really happy to be working with you and presenting this instrument today.
So the purpose of the LIRSPE is to evaluate the effort made by the effort made by physical education teachers to include all children. And by the way, the book on the left is a book that we just finished. It's called Universal Design for Learning in Physical Education. We wrote it with also with Dr. Ali Bryan and Dr. Katrina Arndt. And it has a whole chapter on Universal Design for Learning and also the LIRSPE in there. So it also talks about providing information on the strengths and weaknesses of the lesson to reduce the barriers, to promote equity and access, and to encourage learning for all. And that's the purpose of the LIRSPE. And by the way, it is also a validated instrument that we published in 2017. And so the LIRSPE is driven by Universal Design for Learning. And as many of you know, that the three components of the LIRSPE are multiple means of engagement, multiple means of representation, and multiple means of action and expression. And so engagement, for example, when you're starting the class, how do you pull the kids in? How do you get them excited? Where the student sits, is that going to be appropriate for them to be engaged? How you teach, how you instruct, what you teach, that's all part of universally designed teaching. And then lastly, action and expression is how do you assess what the students know? How do they show you what they learned? And how do you accommodate for differing abilities in your class? And those are the concepts that we are covering in the LIRSPE. So utilizing the scale. When you're utilizing the scale, looking at barriers, what are your barriers to including all the kids? Finding out about the setting, your instruction, your supports. What are your paraeducators doing? What kind of noise is happening? What other distractions are in your setting? Collaborate to support your students with your physical therapists, with your occupational therapists, with your paraeducators. Share with the direct and related service providers what your goals and objectives are and collaborate. And then also engage in professional development and also enhance your learning of what you're already doing and what you need to improve on.
Thank you, Lauren. So in this, in the next couple of minutes, we're going to show you a video that was created by NICPAT, and it really goes through the rating scale. We've also attached as part of this presentation the scale and formatted in two ways. One is the 1 through 5 rubric, which is a little bit, you will have to learn a little bit more about the Likert scale and what that means. But for the purposes of this presentation, we strongly suggest that you use the LIRSPE, the always, sometimes, never, not applicable. And that way, as we go through the pieces of the LIRSPE, you'll be able to rate yourself. And one thing Lauren and I just want to highlight is we respect what you are all doing and understand that there's a lot of difficult situations that teachers are facing right now. But the other thing that we recognize in talking to parents, students, and teachers, that this could also be an opportunity for change a way to change your program. Many students with disabilities have been marginalized during COVID and continue to be marginalized. We've heard from parents who really want their children to get back in. And as well, many school systems may see this as an opportunity for teachers to re-examine their program to make it more inclusive so that students have access to the learning. So again, we're going to just show you this video and give yourself an opportunity to look at each of the pieces and rate yourself on what are the things that you can do better, what are the things you might not have any control over, such as class LIRSPE, but what are some other considerations that will potentially enhance your program. So let me pull this up for you. And again, we want to thank NICPAD for the wonderful job they did with this.
An inclusion scale for physical education was created with the philosophy of universal design for learning. This tool can assist teachers with the planning and instruction of their classes to ensure all students are taking part in the lesson. Although this does not ensure the feeling of being included for students with disabilities, it helps teachers be inclusive as possible in execution of all lessons. The rating scale can be used in professional preparation classes as an intervention to improve teaching and a training protocol for reflective practice. We hope this will be helpful on your journey to include all students. When the general physical education teacher welcomes children into the gym, all of the kids in the class are together. Children with disabilities are sitting or standing with their peers and included in the instructions during the introduction. Have the class do the warm-up together with everyone working at their own pace. Vary speed of play based on the performance of all children to avoid leaving anyone behind. Provide instructions that allow all students to succeed and benefit within the program by accommodating different learning styles. Be sure the lesson provides a variety of choices to execute skills. Give students opportunities to make decisions on their individual learning. Make sure proper support and accommodations are available options to the class. For demonstrations, use different members of the class to show skills. Work with support staff to assist children in learning as needed. Provide the lessons to a paraeducator before class and explain their role throughout the activities. When using partners, make sure that students with disabilities have chances to partner with same-aged peers when appropriate, not just the paraeducator. The paraeducator should encourage social interactions with peers when possible. Plan ahead to organize and manage partners effectively, and ensure that children with disabilities have a partner. Do not allow students to pick teams. Avoid elimination games. Avoid students waiting in line to maximize physical activity during the class. Distribute as much equipment as possible to provide more opportunities to respond. Maximize engagement time and opportunities to respond by modifying the organization and rules of the game. Be sure there is a range of equipment to meet the learning needs of all students in the class. Reduce noise and distractions to maximize success. When assessing the class, children with disabilities should be assessed alongside their peers. Provide modifications as needed. When children with disabilities are assessed, the scores should count at least for the baseline of performance. Give feedback in regard to skill performance that is positive general or positive specific, with the use of first names. The whole class should be together and attentive as you present the closure or cool down of the class. Check for understanding of all children during closure.
Okay, so let me get out of here. Great. All right. There we go.
Thanks, Michelle. We also just want to emphasize that we know that with COVID, you're going to have to consider all these things and then some additional modifications according to COVID, but that's something, it's just the name of the game in these days. So now Michelle's going to give you an overview of the tool that you have in front of you.
The video really gives you a wonderful sort of comprehensive outline of all the components of the class that we used in the scale. There's a lot to think about for sure. But again, if you can just identify a couple of components, several components that you could begin to change, access will be enhanced for your students. Introductions. Quickly, do all the students come in at the same time? And Lauren will sort of dig down a little bit deeper. Oftentimes students with disabilities are coming in after the class or with their paraprofessional. They already start with a disadvantage, okay? Warm up, we can talk about how you can enhance that speed of play. We'll go into a little bit more. That can be a confusing term for individuals. Differentiating instruction, most of us know that concept, but again, we'll outline that. Variety of choices within the lesson, demonstration, support staff, planning for partners, and social interactions. There's a lot to think about. Creating teams is really key, particularly at the middle and high school, so that everybody feels like they actually belong. Elimination games, don't do them. Managing and waiting time, providing choices, minimizing distractions, assessment, feedback, and closure. We have deemed these as sort of evidence-based practices that really align with the principles of universal design for learning and are key components for the LIRSPE that you can use to improve your teaching or those of your colleagues to assist as you develop and enhance your program. So Lauren's now going to take over and just talk a little bit about some of the best practices within some of these components.
Sure. And as Michelle mentioned, when kids enter the gym, and I've seen this too many times, you have a self-contained class that comes in after that inclusive class, and the kids are sitting on the side. That's not inclusion. So make every effort to start the class with all the students present, not coming late, 5 minutes late. Their paraeducator picked them up late. They couldn't find the child's walker for class. That's no excuse. Eliminate those barriers. If the students are consistently late, find out why they're late and do something about it, okay? Now for the warm-up, and again, when the kids are all there, making sure that the warm-up is done as not to do like 2 laps and everybody has to finish those 2 laps. Ensure that the warm-up is challenging. It does not exclude some children. If you say everybody do 20 push-ups or everybody run 2 laps around the track, there's always going to be people that are going to be late. And so don't do sit-ups for a number, but do it for a song or do it for an amount of time. Stretch muscles, not a specific stretch, but maybe for a particular amount of time. Move for time and not a specific number. So get that picture that the kids with disabilities or kids maybe who aren't as athletic aren't going to be behind and they're not going to stand out if you do it that way.
Here we go.
And then related to speed of play, ensure that the speed of the game can accommodate all students. And so some ways that you can slow down the pace of games, and these are just a few examples that teachers have given us and that we've used in our experiences. Carpet squares, they're great for slowing down the game. Using slower balls or beach balls or even balloons. Maybe every player has to touch the ball before you score. Playing on scooters is a great way to slow down the game, and it's still challenging. Playing with partners, everybody has to have a peer and work with their peer in the game. Maybe allow additional bounces in volleyball or tennis that slows down the game a little bit. And one of my favorites is using a Frisbee for a puck in hockey. It moves slower, kids don't get hurt. You can even put some bells in the bottom so that it becomes more stimulating.
And when we talk about speed of play, oftentimes we're talking about differentiating instruction. And the thing that is interesting is we're not just differentiating instruction for the child with disability, we're differentiating instruction for all of the students. And typically, if that child with disability is having a difficult time, more often than not, other students in the class are having a difficult time. So we often think of, oh, it's for the child with disability, but really no, when we look at differentiating instruction and when we look at speed of play, it's really for the wide range of abilities in your class, particularly at the middle and high school level. Once you get to those upper level classes and ages, you're going to see a wider range of skills and abilities. So we want you to really think about, again, how you differentiate instruction and make it so that students do feel like they're contributing and they're members, you know, active members in the class. And so look at your content. And in this situation, we'll just show you a little example. So this is a throwing catching, high school kids, one of those activities where you start close, you're tossing, you're catching, and you're changing sides. So we'll just give you a little bit of this. And what's interesting is this is a peer supported class. So they're kids with and without disabilities. And I think one of the students was like, just moving a little bit slower. But there was also a student in the class named Austin, and Austin has autism, and he was really on the periphery. He wanted to engage, but there was a lot of activity going on. So Gianna, one of his classmates, took it and scaled down the activity so that they were face to face. They were making eye contact, and he had the ability to be successful in a sort of a much more closed setting. Still the same environment, but just in a way that allowed him to be able to participate. And let me just show you what this looks like. Here we go.
3. Nice job. 1, 2, 3. Oh, nice. Look at you. Right? One more. 1, 2, 3.
That's success. That's success right there. Just a simple, okay, Gianna, can you take and work with Austin and just work on throwing and catching and tracking? Austin's totally in the game. He knows what he's doing. He's doing what he can, as well as the other students in the class who are participating at a little bit faster level.
3.
And I'll take this one. So another option is to provide a lot of choices related to equipment. You see on the bottom, this is a batting unit. You see all the different balls and bats and pieces of equipment that kids can choose from. And if you look at the basketball unit on the top, there's a lot of different baskets the kids can choose from. They can throw it through the hoops. They can throw it in that basket in the back. And then also level tiering of skills, making kids either further or closer to their targets, and having kids doing some skills that are more challenging. For example, maybe in tennis, we had some kids hitting with rackets. We had some kids just actually practicing throwing with the ball because they're practicing that range of motion of tennis. And so tiering of skills and environmental stimulation, should we have music or no music? Should the kids work individually or with peers? And they get to choose. And those are some of the options that the kids are going to have that provide them that range of choices. And relating back to UDL, provides more engagement and challenge and excitement.
Thank you, Lauren. I just want to add, particularly during COVID, when we are doing remote lessons as well, students' choices are limited to what they have in their environment, but teachers very well have worked with those limitations and been so creative with how they use balls made from paper or targets with, as we saw in a shopping cart. So how we have used equipment to really enable students to use what they have to provide those choices so that they can participate.
Also related to demonstrations, ensure that you demonstrate and also allow the students to demonstrate, to show off what they know. And I know that sometimes teachers, you get sucked into picking a child, oh, I know he can do it. But what about that child that might be on the periphery that's just waiting for you to see what they can do? Make sure that you use a variety of students to help you with the demonstrations, but also using videos and posters and different ways to engage the students. But I have to say, every time I talk to my students, my college students, they remember the time that the teacher asked them to demonstrate. So that's important.
And I also think when you have peers working with peers, when you ask one student or child to demonstrate and the other to give feedback, I think they're both learning what the effective cues are for the skill, but not always having a student who does it perfectly can actually assist students in understanding what the key skills are in order for them to really do that well. So demonstrations are really quite interesting, how you can use students to really to enhance your learning, not as well as boosting up a child's self-esteem by allowing them to demonstrate the skill.
A big one. This is what we've seen in the literature. One of the biggest barriers to inclusion is the use of support staff. So ensure that all your support staff know that the objectives of the lesson, what they need to do for each child they're working with. This should happen ahead of time if it's possible. And so we've done some research because people are like, when are we going to have time? Well, emails, texts, providing lesson plans to the paraeducators. If you have a whiteboard or blackboard in the gym, we have also like a 3x5 card or some kind of even post-it note with just what they're supposed to do during the lesson. If it's possible, they could come to class early for some micro training. Even 3 or 4 minutes can help them get on the ball with what you want them to do, what equipment options that they can have, what their roles and responsibilities are for that day, because it's going to eliminate so many barriers and headaches during the class. And then also providing feedback throughout the class to the students and the paraeducators, as well as giving them some feedback after class is really helpful. Also, creating teams effectively, it can be such a nightmare for some kids who are like, oh no, don't pick teams. I don't want to be picked last. It is absolutely, in the literature again, the nightmare for the kids, particularly kids with disability. So maybe group them by seasons, or when you were born, you want 4 teams. Okay, who was born in the winter, summer, spring, fall? Maybe what month you were born in if you want to have more teams. Maybe you give them colored hairbands, or as you saw in the video, they had different colored popsicle sticks, and that's how they determine their teams. We also saw that they had playing cards that they spread out, and that's how they pick partners. Maybe do rock, paper, scissors game. The kids love the rock, paper, scissors game. Maybe give them the colored balloons, and they color balloon, that's their team. I'm sure there's lots of other ways that we can create teams effectively, quickly, and without hurting feelings. And that's what we need to do.
Thank you, Lauren. That was really wonderful. And I heard a teacher say to me one time, kids get it. So if you're creating an environment that is equitable, and again, based on those principles of universal design for learning, kids get it. And they understanding, yeah, this is what we want. So all of those ideas that Lauren presented are really wonderful ways of balancing the skills so that students feel like they are contributing members of their class, and you're just not highlighting or identifying or keynoting on the student who probably doesn't need that identification. So creating teams, choosing partners, big deals.
Another big thing, and this is what we've seen again and again, elimination games. Don't play elimination games. There's no reason for it. And if you look at our rubrics that we created, there are ways to actually take an elimination game and create a game where no one's eliminated. And we encourage you to do that.
We know that as best practices in our physical education teachers program. It's like my students are like, elimination game. Nope, we're not doing that. Because who's oftentimes eliminated? We know this child who needs the most skill and more practice in that. So that's rule number 1 in physical education teacher education programs: no elimination games.
And then managing waiting time and distributing equipment. And of course, everybody knows that when kids get off task or they get in trouble is when they have to wait. And the other thing we know is the more equipment you have, the more turns they get, the more skill development they get. So using a variety of equipment, as you can see here, this is one of our tennis programs. Try to have a piece of equipment for each child if that's possible. That can also minimize waiting times by providing stations or providing equipment distributed around the room. And if there's not enough equipment, maybe provide alternate activities in between. So instead of kids waiting for equipment, maybe they're doing some fitness activity or some jump roping or some warm-up activity that's going to get them ready for that skill. But having enough equipment is really important, and it's going to really help your lesson and kids' skill improvement.
And I'm going to reinforce another concept from our teacher education program, which is opportunities to respond, OTR. 1 ball, 25 kids, kickball, not many kids get to engage and respond. 25 balls, lots of throwing and catching or kicking practice times, many students get to demonstrate their learning. So again, as Lauren mentioned, lines, minimal equipment actually lead to behaviors that are really inappropriate. So we're looking for that opportunities to respond by having lots of choices and equipment. And
one other thing too, I want to say, if you go back, that, for example, some of the balls might be like a beach ball. You might even have some balloons. There's some foam tennis balls. Those are not just for the kids with disabilities. As we said, all the kids have the option to choose any piece of equipment they want. And that's not making the kids with disabilities stand out now. It's making them be part of the class. And this is just part of the process.
Great.
As you saw in the video, minimizing distractions, everything that's possible. I know sometimes you have a curtain between your gym and another gym. If you're on a Zoom, maybe you have the parents or somebody's cooking in the background. It's not always possible. But if we can eliminate noise, provide enough equipment for everybody, making sure that any open doors are closed if we can to minimize that distraction. I know sometimes the paraeducators, specialists get caught talking in the corner of the gym. That can be very distracting. It's okay to say, you know what, I love that you're socializing. Can you please go in the hallway? Because I find that distracting for the teacher as well. And then minimize any equipment that's sitting out that can be distracting to the kids, because I know a lot of our kids, me included, I'm like, ooh, what's that? Can we play with that now? No, that's for later, but if it's sitting out, it's distracting. So how can we minimize not just noise, but any distractions that are gonna make the kids, pull the kids' attention away from your class?
And for those of you who may teach even some students who are fleers or with autism, if you have that open door, you might want to keep your equipment door closed. So look at the environment, or even the fan. Is the fan going when you're in? Is there a fluorescent light that's out? So all of those distractors can be very difficult, particularly for students who might have a little bit of a sensory overload. So those distractions are really key and often linked to behaviors. So something to consider.
And now related to assessment of all children, and nothing is more marginalizing than having the teacher skip over you or tell you that your performance doesn't matter. Everybody's performance matters, and that's what this is about. So when you're assessing, you can assess all the students at the same time. Here's kids working on upper body strength. Some kids are doing bent knee push-ups, straight leg push-ups, wheelchair push-ups, wall push-ups. You can have everybody assessed at the same time. Use alternative assessments when necessary. Maybe you get a wedge mat and one of the kids is laying on a wedge mat and they're pushing themselves up the way they can. And again, all scores should be counted and recorded. Everybody's performance matters. Don't skip over any child, no matter how low their score is. And just encourage improvement when possible. Maybe their score isn't going to be used for a report card, but it's going to be used for their pretest, and they're going to work to achieve from there. But that one of the things in the LIRSPE is that you don't get a good score if you don't include all the kids in the assessment and include all their scores. So make sure you do that.
And as Lauren mentioned in the beginning of this presentation, the LIRSPE is linked to the Universal Design for Learning, and action and expression could be another way that you think about assessment. How do students express their learning? And it definitely is not a one size fits all. So as you develop your assessments, consider rubrics, different scales, so that students can work towards their goals, but not work to or not be able to achieve a goal that's impossible for them. So assessment's really key for all of us.
And then also, if you really want your students to achieve, you have to give them feedback, and not just positive general feedback. So provide positive general and positive specific and corrective feedback throughout all the lessons to all the students, not just the kids who you think are going to improve. And I've seen it all the time. You know, sometimes people will change the way they talk. Oh, you're doing so great. That's not doing those kids any favors. It's okay to say, you know what, I like the way you followed through, but you really need to step with your opposite foot or rotate your hips. Let me show you how. That is going to help the kids improve. Use their first names when possible, because then the kids can internalize your feedback and know you're talking to them. And one of the biggest things is expect achievement from all your students. Participation is not the goal. We want our kids to achieve and improve. So expect achievement. Ensure that you provide feedback to the boys, the girls, kids with and without disabilities. Even if somebody seems like they want to be in the corner, they don't want attention, they should get feedback. If you're using peer tutors, you still should give the kids who have a peer tutor or a paraeducator as much feedback as their peers get. And then celebrate successes. It's okay to jump up and down and cheer, and even give a shout out to kids who have really reached the personal best at the end of class. I mean, we've had kids who it's the first time they ever jumped off the side of the pool, and they don't have a disability, but we should give a shout out to them because they should be recognized.
And I want to just reinforce one of the points that Lauren made is oftentimes the teachers don't engage with the students with disabilities and expect the paraeducator to provide all the feedback. So when you do reach out to the students, make sure again, you're reaching out to all the students in the class. That's another best practice. Have you reached every student in the class? And that way the student is part of the class and not just working with the paraeducator. So again, that feedback is really key for, again, self-esteem and how students feel about themselves.
And another thing is when you're doing closure, and this is a great picture, I love that teaching the kids sportsmanship and high-fiving and closing the class with some kind of recap of what you did. Closure is so important. Make sure all the students are present for the closure. Don't let the para take the child, I mean, unless they have to go to the bathroom, but don't let them take them to PT or take them back to the classroom. Let them stay in class and be part of the celebration at the end, whether it's celebrating good behavior or good performance and they get stickers or points. They should experience that too. Checking for understanding. What did we talk about today? What muscle is this? What did we talk about? What's your resting heart rate? Everybody should be there for the closure. Review the main focus of the lesson and what they learned, and ask every child, do you understand? Show me that you understand, because their understanding and their comprehension and their ability to repeat what you did matters.
And I want to reinforce, this was pre-COVID, this picture. So we're probably going to see kids 6 feet apart, maybe elbows up bumping, but the same principles apply. We're just changing it a little bit. Hopefully we're going to be back to quote unquote normal practices in September, but all of the ideas and concepts and images that we've displayed can be accommodated through social distance practices or remote practices.
And so this is our book, Universal Design for Learning in Physical Education. The whole book is about universal design for learning. There's a whole chapter on the LIRSPE in there. It actually gives you all the rubrics you need for each of the items on the scale. And in this book, we do use the 1 through 5 Likert scale, but as Michelle said, we've given you the always, sometimes, never version, which is also a good one. And these are some of the resources from NICPAD and from some other resources that we have. We hope you'll utilize those resources, and we hope you'll share the LIRSPE, because it's a really great tool, and I think it's going to help a lot of teachers include kids and be more successful.
And as I mentioned earlier, one of the things that can happen as we move back into our classrooms is to consider how you can be more inclusive, how those students potentially who are siloed out or have been marginalized or working in smaller self-contained classes can be included. It doesn't have to be in the large setting, it can be in smaller settings, but the LIRSPE would be a great tool as you, the educator, the physical educator, go through each of the pieces and just consider, okay, are they coming in together? Am I differentiating instruction? And I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of revamp our practices so that we are more inclusive, more welcoming, more diversified of their program. I want to thank you, Lauren, and I want to thank you. We know you're doing good work. We know that you're working hard. We're here to help you. If you have any questions about using LIRSPE, if you need more support or just advocacy, we are here for you. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. And we also want to thank the organizers for putting these presentations on. Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you, Michelle. You're awesome. You're terrific. And thank you for all your hard work. Take care, everybody. Be safe.